Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft. I am Brian Nemhauser at Hawk Blogger on Twitter. And folks, we're here for another NFL Draft watch party with Real Hawk Talk. Tonight is most likely going to be just me going solo, old school, way back in the day. For folks that have been following the blog for a very, very long time, you're used to just hearing me, which is either a nice return to the old times or a real disappointment. Either way, I'm the guy you got, and we're going to talk draft. I'm excited to talk with all of you. I see there's already folks in the chat. There's already conversation going on. Last night we were on for 4 hours. We were on so long that the YouTube chat in our streaming system actually froze up because there had been chat for so long and it could no longer handle all of that. So looking forward to today, tonight, wherever it is for you. It's a big, big day. Obviously, day 1 was huge. What you do with that 5th pick, that is the Powerball pick of the draft, of the decade, of the multiple decades for the Seahawks. If you hit on the 5th pick in the draft, it can be a franchise-changing pick. If you miss on that pick, it can also be a franchise-changing pick. If you pass on somebody, that can be franchise changing as well. All of those things are in play for the Seahawks, as we know. And then they had the start of their draft, the start of their quote normal draft. And I think slept on a little bit was the Seahawks haven't had the 20th pick for quite a while. So, I think that you have to appreciate the fact that both of these picks were pretty darn good for Seattle in terms of where they were in the draft. And the board didn't fall perfectly in the sense that you didn't get exactly the optimal need addressed with the optimal talent at the optimal spot. You didn't get a chance to trade back and accumulate more picks in the sweet spot of this draft, which is really picks between 20 and 70. There's just a lot of players. If you can pick, the more you can pick between 20 and 70, the better off you're going to be. I think there's a lot of starters that are going to come off the board today. But in another way, the board fell pretty beautifully to the Seahawks. They got the best cornerback by most people's assessment in this draft, and they got the best receiver by almost everybody's assessment in this draft. And they didn't have to trade up or trade anything to get those. They just got those guys. And those are two of the most valuable positions on any roster. And now Seattle's done something that I've always advocated for them to do, and they rarely have done, which is they've created a pile at a position. They've created an area of strength in their position group. And so now you can argue, depending on how things play out, the Seahawks may have the best receiving core in the NFL. I think it's certainly going to be worth debating that as the season goes on. The Seahawks may have the best cornerback group in the NFL. That is going to be something to debate going forward, but it's absolutely in the conversation. And if you want to win Super Bowls, it starts. Everyone talks about quarterback, and I get it. Quarterback is a big, big, big deal. But getting some part of your team that is the best possible group or an elite player, that is really how you start to build championship teams. So, I had fun kind of going back. I watched our initial reactions to both picks. I certainly wasn't thrilled when the Witherspoon pick was announced. And as I was joking with the guys and gals today about 100% of that for me was very emotional. It was very much about, I had my heart set on hoping that they would see what they needed to see and be confident that Jalen Carter was going to be the kind of pro that they needed. And so them not picking Jalen Carter was just me being crestfallen that, nope, he did not pass the test. It really wasn't even about Schneider or Carroll. I didn't leave that feeling angry at them or thinking that they really screwed it up. I know I think I said something like that in the moment, but that's really not how I felt. It was much more, man, if the stars had aligned and Jalen Carter could have been the man that they needed him to be, that would have allowed them to pick him at 5, and he would have lived up to his potential in Seattle, there's no other pick that would have been better for this team. So the fact that just didn't happen was disappointing. And I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not going to spin it. That's just the case. That has nothing to do with Devin Witherspoon. As far as other options of what they could have done, I mean, obviously, if Will Anderson had fallen to them, I would have been happy for them to pick Will Anderson. Wasn't a choice. So of the guys that were left, even the people that love Anthony Richardson, I was not a huge Anthony Richardson fan, obviously, but even those folks, he wasn't a choice. So no real point in talking about it. The options were trading back, Tyree Wilson, Devin Witherspoon. Those were really the choices. And they clearly were trying to trade back. There's no other reason that you're on the clock as long as they were all the way down to the end. They tried to trade back. They couldn't. They took Devin Witherspoon. And since they couldn't trade back, it really becomes a choice of Devin Witherspoon or Tyree Wilson. No friggin' question in my mind which of those two guys I wanted. Witherspoon's a guy that I think can be a blue chip corner. Tyree Wilson's a question mark as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what he will become. And we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out. I am pretty bullish on having two great corners. And honestly, I think this could end up being three great corners. I'm still high on Trey Brown. I think that you could end up having four great corners, depending on how things go with Kobe Bryant. I think that Michael Jackson is no slouch. I don't think Michael Jackson has great corner upside, but Michael Jackson is about as good of a backup corner as you're going to find in the NFL, if that's how it works out. And he's super, super physical. So I don't know. I think that it's an exciting group. I think that Schneider said there was like one or two players that he would have stayed put for, and Witherspoon was one. I really like John Schneider, but that's crap. I mean, if Witherspoon was one of the guys they would stick for, then why were they on the phones up until the last second trying to trade out of the pick? So, I mean, they clearly were going to trade out if they could. I think that maybe Will Anderson was a guy they wouldn't have traded out for. Maybe Anthony Richardson was that guy. My read of looking at John Schneider when he first started his press conference last night was disappointment. My 90% instinct is that that's about the fact that he could not make a move back with either 5 or 20. And I think that 20 especially was a bummer for him. He did not want to stick at 20. He knows he could have gotten a good player at 25 or 28 or even 32 or whatever it would be. And he didn't get to add a pick as a result. And so he had to stick and pick. And I think that really bugged him. But there's a chance that part of what he was disappointed about is he wanted Anthony Richardson. As someone who was really against that as a move and didn't think that was going to happen and bet some money that it wouldn't happen, I'm going to absolutely acknowledge that there's a chance that was the case. And, there'll be people that say that they've got sources that say it was absolutely going to be Anthony Richardson, and other people say that they won't. And honestly, I don't care about any of that because nobody really knows, and I don't trust anybody's sources. So unless John tells me himself that they were going to do it, I won't believe it. So, but it is a chance. I think I think that is possible that that's part of what he was disappointed about. On the Jalen Carter front, one of the things that I would bring up there is, I don't think people were like, oh, maybe he'll slide to 20. I don't think he was on their board at this point. Like if they had any interest in Jalen Carter, they would have taken him at 5 because it wasn't a talent issue. And so once he was off their board, he was off their board. And there are reports for folks that have seen on Twitter, Mike Holmgren's been on KJR, and he was talking about the fact that the visit didn't go well. Carter came out, didn't go well. I'm not super shocked. I mean, we've been trying to spin it ourselves as much as possible because we wanted it to be logical, but it is not surprising in the least that a guy that had already concerns about his character, this is a guy that the press in Georgia said was not made available to them throughout the season, which is very unusual especially for a guy that's one of the best players on the team. Clearly, the coaches had some reason to be concerned about giving him media availability. there were a lot of talk about some of his family background, some of the people that he hung around with and his crowd, the fact that he got into this racing deal and had that. We don't know what they found in further background checks. Wouldn't be shocking if there were other things in his past that were concerning. Then he shows up overweight to his pro day. Then he doesn't finish the position drills. Then his agent says, I'm only going to talk to top 10 teams. All these things point to people handling things in some way because Jalen Carter just is a question mark at best. And if they're being honest with themselves, he's probably someone who, even if he hits, he may not hit for long. He might be the Albert Haynesworth storyline. Albert Haynesworth, for people that don't remember, was a world beater for the Titans. He went to what was the Redskins at that point. Huge contract. I want to say like $100 million. I mean, I don't remember. I remember it being a massive contract, especially for a defensive tackle. And he was never the same. And he was always a moody guy, always just known as kind of being cantankerous. And I think he just stopped caring about the game. And I would not be at all surprised if Jalen Carter's a guy that maybe he pops and shows some really great talent and then fizzles or gets into problems or some other issues pop up and he never becomes the sustainable great player. Maybe he could have been your Marcus Tubbs. Now that's a pull for people that remember him on the Seahawks, old first round pick, defensive tackle. Marcus Tubbs was good enough to help the Seahawks get to a Super Bowl, and then he kind of physically fell apart. That wasn't a motivation thing. But, I think that it's really not worth crying over spilt milk with Jalen Carter because the fact of the matter is once they had their time with him, he was never going to be a Seahawk, plain and simple. And if they had that instinct in working with him, then I would rather them get a guy at 5 that they feel really good about and really excited about that they know is going to add to their room than take a guy just based on need and against their ethics and against their kind of philosophy that they think would create issues in the locker room. So anyway, that's my take on Carter. There are questions from patrons, and I want to try to take some of those just as we get into the draft. If you haven't already, patreon.com/hawkblogger gets you instant access to the Slack channel. You too can be asking questions. I know there's folks in the chat here asking questions. I'm going to take Patreon questions first. They have been part of the crew, and we're going to give them that right. And then I'm going to start sharing my screen because most likely the draft will start while I am talking. So let's go ahead and do this. That's way too big. Let's do that. All right. So hopefully you all can see that. And I'm gonna shrink this down so you only have to see this part of it. And hopefully that's good for all of you. First question in the chat here is from Braxton, and he asks, which first rounder would you rather get a beer with, Witherspoon or Smith and Jigba? I think that's pretty easy. Witherspoon, that guy seems like a live wire. He seems like a lot of fun. He's got a pretty good sense of himself. And yeah, I would love to get to know that guy a little bit better. Excuse me. All right, next, Troy Fagan asks, with a lot of the defensive linemen I would have taken at the top of the second round going in the late first round, are you fine with waiting until round 3 to address that position? This is the question of the night, folks. I do not want the Seahawks to artificially push defensive tackle up the board because they didn't get defensive linemen in the first round. I think that would be a mistake. I am talking about guys like, I'm looking at my big board, Keon White. Like, I do not want to hear them say Keon White. I don't want to hear them say, Siaka Ika, even though I like him, I don't want him to take him this early. If they took Aditamawa Adebawari, that I could find my way to. That guy's got unlimited ceiling and also potential major bust. But he is a guy that could be worth that. But as much as I want them to add to the defensive line, I don't want them to reach it, especially at 37. So I would, as crazy as it sounds, if they decide that they want to go with one of the tight ends, which sounds probably crazy to everybody, that would be 3 picks in a row where they take best player available at a position that they have reasonable strength, then that would be crazy and also pretty good process, and I'd be okay with it. Like, my favorite player in this draft is Darnell Washington. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'd be very excited if they called his name at some point today. I have a feeling that's not going to happen. My point is, don't reach. So I still have a feeling that they may go center here, but we will see. Okay. Eric asks, knowing that we still haven't addressed either side of the line, would you want to draft TD Mayer if he were available? I think he means tight end, Michael Mayer. So yeah, I would be fine if they graded him as best on their board. He's a really high floor guy, really predictable, especially if they're also able to trade Noah Fant, save $7 million against the cap, and get a rookie that could be around for a while. I think that would be great. So I would be totally fine with that. It's not my first choice, but I think the guy that I'd be most excited if they called his name most likely would be John Michael Schmitz. That would be the guy that I would feel like really, really meets a need and can really elevate the team and have the biggest impact. And I'm pretty sure won't be available at their next pick. So that's one guy that sticks out for me. I know we should be starting the draft here pretty soon. So we'll keep an eye out on that. All right. Mark Zuck asks, if we draft guard, center, and linebacker with the next 3 picks, how do you feel about it? Now you're pushing my boundaries a little bit. If you don't have any defensive linemen in your top 5 picks in the top 83, that's trouble. Now this is assuming that you only get those 3 picks. I absolutely believe the Seahawks are going to be trying to trade up, either move 83 up earlier into the 3rd round, but realistically, I think they're going to want to be adding more picks. Like, I think they want to get at least one more pick in the 2nd or 3rd round today. And if that means trading back from 37 to do it, so be it. If that means trading some of their 5th round picks or some of their 6th round or 4th round, anything, and then packaging Fanton with any of that, I think makes sense for Seattle. The Fant move independently, for what it's worth, I don't think he's worth that much, especially, since they're going to save so much on the salary side. I just think you want to see if anyone will take him, and I think it's worth doing. And that's a little bit contingent on them being able to find another tight end in this draft that they really like, of which there's a number. Like, there's probably at least 5 tight ends. Well, now there's 4 that I think are high-end potential starters. And that's not even getting into some like extreme athletes like Zach Kuntz. So I think, and yes, I said his name. So I think we'll see how that plays out. All right, let's keep going. All right. Derek Woods asks, now that wide receiver and cornerback have been taken, how would you rank the likelihood of them taking a player in the following position groups on day 2, in no particular order? Tight end, running back, defensive line, edge, linebacker, safety, interior O-line, offensive tackle, quarterback. Likelihood. So we want to rank it on likelihood. I think likelihood is on day 2. I think likelihood linebacker is very likely, I believe. They've drafted linebackers earlier than most. I think that that's very likely. I think a Trenton Simpson is really a possibility there. I think that Drew Sanders is definitely a possibility today, as a name that could be called. We'll kind of see about that. BJ Ojolari, if you're talking about outside linebackers, is a guy that could be picked. So I think linebacker is pretty likely. I think interior O-line is, I'm gonna say likeliest. It's right up there. I really think that they like some of these interior O-lines. I think Cody Mauk, I think John Michael Schmitz, I think Joe Tippmann, are all guys that they could like. Luke Whippler, although some of those guys might be available a little later. Steve Avila, that's a guy that can play guard or center. So I think there's a lot of guys there that could go today. And then from there, so I think like linebacker, interior O-line, edge, I think there's a decent chance. Then tight end. Then defensive line, defensive tackle. I don't know. I think it's well, I'm debating myself now. I mean, it really depends on where they end up going with some of these guys. I think there's a few guys that there's more likely chance that they could take on the defensive line here. I think Adi is one. I think Tooley is another. I'm like Carl Brooks could be a third rounder or a late second rounder, but I'm just not as high on like Keon White and some of these other guys that I just think they might go later. So sorry, I was just checking out some news and trying to keep up with it. All right, let's keep moving here. Mark Zuck again. If Brian Branch is available at 52, do you take him and trade Quandary? I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm a huge fan of Brian Branch. I think he's one of the most projectable players in this draft, and really happy that I would be really happy to have him on the team, but I just don't think that's going to happen. EM asks, why didn't we see the Witherspoon pick coming? Assuming Carter and Levis were off the board, does it make more sense now in hindsight? I guess I don't think about it as it didn't see it coming. We actually talked about it quite a bit on some of our pre-draft shows, and there were mocks that had him going. I think Matt Miller talked about it weeks ago, had the Seahawks interested in Devin Witherspoon. Jeff and I talked about it quite a bit. And so, I mean, it was surprising because it was, I think it was more dramatic than it was surprising. Is that for me? Like, I had built up that I really wanted the Jalen Carter thing to work out, and I fell off that when it didn't. But it wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe they picked Devin Witherspoon. I knew exactly why they would do that. It made perfect sense to me. So yeah, I think if you're looking at it as taking the best player off your board that has high positional value, then it makes a lot of sense. So I think that's how I'd say it. All right. Eric asks, depending on the outcome of this draft, what options will the Seahawks need to consider to free up cap space to address the remaining holes? So the Noah Fant thing's one. That I think they're waiting to see what happens, and we'll see. I would say that extending Uchenna Nwosu is another. I think that there are probably a couple other extension options that they could look at. I think they could look at restructuring Jamal Adams. There's quite a few ways for them to create space. I'm not particularly concerned about that. And, the bigger question is, who are they going to use the space on, in my mind? Because I think that, a lot of people are like, oh, let's get Puna back. Let's get Al Woods back. Let's get Shelby Harris back. It's not that I think those guys are terrible. I'm just, especially Puna, I'm not ready to run it back with him. Like, I think Shelby Harris is actually an impactful defensive lineman, and I'd be happy to have him back. Al Woods I loved, but I have some questions about his health and whether or not at his age he's going to be able to keep it going. So, yeah, it's more to me, where is that money going to be spent? We'll see. We'll see. All right. Let's keep going. EM asks, would you prefer Mayer or Washington? I've I've got Michael Mayer higher on my big board as a player, but Washington is the guy I'd be happier for them to call. I think Mayer is probably the better overall player, but I love Washington as a very unique athlete and just a badass, and I want more badass on the team. So that's very much more a fan take than an analysis take. Sam Brown asks, do you think Jackson Smith and Jigba has the potential to be the best Seahawk of all time with an X in his first name? I would need to know other options. I can't even think of who else would be an X in the first name. So I'll go with yes. I think he has a chance to be that. And then Matt G is the final question here. And I'm curious. We've not seen the draft start yet, or at least I'm not seeing it. So let me know if I'm missing something here, folks. But sorry, last question from Matt G. Keep hearing we need an edge, but we used a second on one last year. Tell me about Maffei's first year, and can we expect a jump? What's the ceiling? So this is pretty interesting. So edge, first of all, let's talk about edge. Edge is an overused term, and it's a simplification, and it's done because some teams run 4-3, some teams run 3-4. An edge in a 4-3 is a defensive end, and they usually are 3-point stance, hand in the ground a lot of times, and they're going up. They're bigger guys. They're going up against offensive tackles, right over the tackle. And then the other guys on 3-4s are outside linebackers, and they are lighter. You're going to be like 250, 260 kind of range, and they're going to be dropping into coverage much more often but they're both edges. And so very different players, very different roles to play. For the Seahawks, as they've been assembled now, Darrell Taylor and Uchenna Nwosu are their edges. And both of them had 9.5 sacks last year. A lot of teams would love to have their two edge players with double-digit sacks. That's pretty good. Uchenna Nwosu is a much more complete player at edge and could play all the downs. He was good in run defense. He was decent in coverage. Darrell Taylor was a one-trick pony. He was a good pass rusher. He was a pretty awful run defender and pretty awful in pass coverage. So you can hope that he's going to improve on those fronts, but you can't be sure. On the other two guys, or other few guys, Boye Mafe, he kind of showed up for me as someone who was more capable of setting the edge against the run and sticking his nose in there and playing physically than Darrell Taylor. He had not shown much in terms of pass rush, but he did show some flashes of pass rush and speed, and athletically, he is an interesting player. So the Seahawks are supposedly high on him. I'm not super high on him. I don't have high hopes. I would be super happy if he turns out that he like busts out. This is the year that we'll find out if he's going to be a rotational guy or whether he's someone that's going to force his way into getting a lot of snaps. I think there's good signs in the fact that he started out not getting more snaps and he earned more and more over time. So I think Mafe is an interesting player. He's not a guy that for me, I would hold a spot for and say, okay, we're not drafting anyone else because we've got Boye Mafe. The other guy to keep in mind is Tyreek Wilson, who they drafted in, I think, the 5th round last year. And he was on IR the whole year, but he was pretty highly thought of from an outside, an edge perspective. I know the Seahawks were interested in him. So we will see if that turns out to be sorry, it was just refreshing. It looks like we are starting to be on the clock here. I'm going to switch to DraftCast. Someone said DraftCast was better. We'll try this out for a second, see how it goes. I don't like how it has all these ads. I wonder if I can do this. There we go. How's that? So yeah. So I think we've got those guys, and we'll see what Tyreek Smith. I see someone mentioning Corey's mentioning Alton as well. And he's someone who knows what's going to go on with Alton Robinson. He's someone who's shown potential, but then not shown up. He was kind of seemed like in the coach's doghouse and then not. So in any event, they've got guys. I would say they've only got one guy that has absolutely locked himself in as a real starter there. Everyone else has meaningful question marks. And it's such an important position that if you can add really good skill set, we got the first pick in. Let's see what the Steelers do. Love it, folks. If there's no spoilers, I think everyone in the chat would appreciate no spoilers. So if you cannot basically respond until you see on the screen in front of you, until you see it on the screen that's being shared, what the pick is, please don't react to it. Please don't share it. And I'd appreciate that. In any event, so I think that it could look at edge. I think that I would consider any draft where you can find a good edge player, you draft him. I don't care if you've got guys there or not. So that's part of why I was interested in Nolan Smith. That's why we were interested in Willie Anderson. Those guys would have been additional players at the same spot. So, all right. So now we are into the draft. We're into day 2. Appreciate folks joining. This has been fun to do. I will warn folks that in about a half an hour, I'm going to have to essentially pause this. I'll try to do maybe something in the car, but I've got to go pick up my son from his class. And so that'll take me a little time. So there'll be some period where I'll probably keep the stream going, but I will not be on video. I will probably go ahead and put my headphones in and try to dial in on the road. We'll see how that works, but I will come back. Really cool. I'm happy this actually worked out. Joey Porter Jr. going to the Steelers. This is a guy that grew up around the Steelers, and they passed on him. I think it would have been tough if they passed on him twice. I'm happy for them that for him that he got the selection. Also happy because he was not going to be a player the Seahawks were going to pick. So every time a team picks a player the Seahawks don't want, that's a good thing. I think we got to watch out here. There are some folks talking about Arizona as a possible destination for John Michael Schmitz. I think that would be a gut punch. Not horrible, but not great. And so we'll see who the Cardinals get. Cardinals were definitely one of the winners yesterday. And they went from 3 to 12 back to 6 and essentially drafted the guy that I'm pretty sure they would have taken at 3 at the 6th pick and got extra picks here and next year a first. So I think, this is a team that has the worst roster in the NFL. I think they made some good, solid moves yesterday. I happen to think that Kyler Murray is not a good player. And that sounds pretty crazy, but I will say it this way. He is absolutely a guy that can pile up stats. He's absolutely a guy that can put up the numbers, win you some games. He's not a leader. He's not a guy that shows up when there's adversity. In fact, I think he shrinks. And when you're that short, it's not good to shrink. When there's adversity, I think that he's not a guy I'd want leading my franchise, and you're locked into that guy for a while. So I feel like almost no matter what the Cardinals do, they're a little bit stuck, not to mention their franchise is a mess. So nothing the Cardinals do worries me. I do think that the moves they've made have the potential to really help them build talent on their roster quickly. It sounds like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be staying in Arizona. Like they've been trying to trade him, and now it sounds like maybe they won't. But that's also often a precursor to it happening. So we'll see about that. We also know that Budda Baker wants to be traded. We'll see if that happens. And I think if those two things happen, then cupboard's even more bare. So if they take a receiver here, that would be interesting. I don't think they will, given all the receivers that have come off the board, but that could be an indication of what's going on with, DeAndre Hopkins. I will say for folks that are just joining, please do not tip the picks in chat. We are trying to just watch what's on the screen. Please don't react until you see the pick show up on the screen. That's kind of the point, so we can have a shared experience here, and appreciate folks that are doing it. And if other folks can help me in chat, just remind others, I would appreciate that. So we have seen Joey Porter Jr. go off. That's good. I think that I see the comment here from Zhao here. I'll put that up on the board. Whoops. Yeah, I think adding LJ Collier makes any team great. So this is a team that knows what they're doing. I hope LJ Collier finds some impact somewhere. I don't think athletically he will ever be really great, but I hope he finds something somewhere. All right. So pick is in. What happened? Oh, looks like the Titans traded into the pick. So the Titans are on the clock. Yes, the Titans are on the clock. So the Cardinals have made another move. Let's find out what the deal is. I'm going to take a look around and see if I can find details of this trade. The Cardinals trade pick 33 and 81, and the Titans trade 41, 72, and a 2024 third. So basically, the Cardinals traded from 33 to 41. They moved back 8 spots. They also move up 9 spots from 81 to 72, and they get a 2024 third. So like that move for them. I think there's a lot of players to like here. That's also just interesting to look at for the Seahawks, because this is what the Seahawks are likely going to be trying to do at 37. They're going to be trying to move back. So if this meant that if the Seahawks trade 37 and 83, they could move up in the third round, into the 70s maybe, or the 60s. But they'd have to move back. Like if they don't get a pick next year, they can move up even farther. So I think there's some interesting options there. We will see who the Titans go with here. Curious about that. I do think it's a good trade for the Seahawks, or for the Cardinals. And it would seem logical that the Titans, if they're moving up here, that they're going for Will Levis, but we'll see. There are folks that want the Seahawks to take Will Levis at 37. I mean, you're tuning into the wrong stream to hear that talk. There's folks on my podcast crew that are definitely want that. I don't think it's like not even in my head as a possibility. But I wouldn't be mad if he goes off the board before 37, so we don't even have to think about it. And so, yeah, I would assume Will Levis is the guy here. We will see shortly. And yep, there he is. He goes to the Titans. Titans are going to be moving on from Ryan Tannehill, the worst kept secret in the NFL, I guess. And now we are on to the Lions. So Lions are another team that could be looking like, I wouldn't be surprised to see Adi go here. This is I think a logical place for him to potentially go. We will see. I think a lot of folks like Keanu Benton. I think this guy's also, he's a little, what's the word? Starts with an M. Mercurial is the word I was looking for. He has some tape where he looks like a world beater, and he has some tape where it's like, I don't know. So I'm not nearly as high on Keanu Benton as some guys are. I wouldn't be like super upset if the Seahawks, were to get him, but he is not my top pick, so to speak. So, hold on. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. See if I can get to mute in time. All right. I no longer am going to sneeze. Somehow it went away. The pick is in. The Lions knew who they wanted. Benton is a bigger boy. He's 310 pounds, and we'll see how that. How I think he's younger, so I think that's also interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure I see like the high upside with him. But I wouldn't be upset, but I like a guy like Adi a little bit better. Different position on the line, but he's, I think, a better athlete and has a higher upside. So I just am more interested in that. As far as the nose tackle stuff, there's guys later in this draft that you can get at nose tackle. It's just a position that Schneider has typically never drafted. He really never has drafted a true nose tackle for what it's worth ever, at any pick. But when he has drafted guys that were kind of more run stuffers, you're talking about 6th, 7th round kind of things, or undrafted free agents. So I don't know that it's likely that he's going to go nose tackle in the first 3 rounds. And if he does, I think a guy like Siaki Ika could be more interesting, although his arm length is shorter. So I don't know if that really fits what Schneider wants. Let's see what the Lions do. Again, appreciate people not tipping picks in the chat. Sam Laporta. That's a great pick. First tight end to go. That's pretty. Oh, sorry, no. Dalton Kincaid went yesterday late, but that is pretty fascinating. He's been a fast riser. A lot of people really like him. This guy's a good blocker, a good receiver, just a super solid player. And good for him. Good for the Lions. Maybe their first logical pick that they've made. I think their first day was among the worst of any of any team in the league. I really thought it was bad. And so now they get a guy that, for me, he was, let's see where I had him on my board. I had Laporta as 5th on my tight end board. I had Michael Mayer 1st, Darnell Washington 2nd, Luke Musgrave 3rd, Dalton Kincaid 4th, and then Laporta. And this was really with the Seahawks in mind. So I wouldn't say those are the best players in that order, but like, I just don't think Dalton Kincaid would have worked as well with the Seahawks and how they play. I think Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington are great fits. And I think Luke Musgrave is really slept on. I think he has potential to be a really, really good pro and be a guy that is better in the pros than he was in college. Laporta to me is more just like a very likely rotational, like solid starting tight end, not necessarily like the major difference maker. So I see that Vegas is on the clock. Was there a trade, or were they already on the clock? Sorry if I've missed something there. Yep. Okay, there was a trade. So the Raiders have traded up. We'll find out what they traded to get to that pick. Interesting who they were trying to hop in order to get into this. Maybe, like, let's hope that they're going after someone that the Seahawks don't want. The Rams are coming up after them. Interesting that so far there are people willing and interested to move up in the 2nd round. So that's pretty fascinating. We will find out. Like, some people in chat are wondering if it could be Hendon Hooker. That's a good guess. They did just obviously, add a quarterback to the room there in Vegas with the porn star from San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo. And so, no one thinks that that's your long-term answer, but maybe not their biggest need. So we'll see what they end up doing here. And then it looks like what they traded is the 38th pick and the 143rd 441st pick to get up to 35. So they traded up 3 spots and gave up 141, which I believe would be a 5th round pick. I'm not doing my math really well, and we'll see who they end up going with. And I think people are starting to get sly about who picks might be, but let's try to stick with not putting spoilers out there. And I think the pick should be announced here pretty soon. I'm also looking at the clock, and I'm going to have to jet here to pick up my son in probably about 10 minutes, which will probably line up exactly with when the Seahawks are going to be in the middle of doing something. So apologize for that. I will try to dial in via my phone and stay on as it happens. But it's going to be messy, folks. So, appreciate your patience, but had to pick up my son in the middle. It's just part of life. So this is taking forever to show up. I'm looking at other tabs to see if it's shown up elsewhere. Has not. So we'll see if this is also a run on tight ends, right? So you see Laporta go. We saw the receivers go one after the other. And maybe we'll see the same thing start to happen with the tight ends. Don't know. But I think these tight ends, it was a shock to me that almost none of them went in the first round. Kincaid lasted till the end. I think that they are very good. I know that people have had trouble projecting tight ends, and that's one of the reasons people pause on drafting tight ends early. But, you get a good tight end, it can be an absolute glue to your offense. I mean, even a pretty good tight end. Think about how Zach Miller affected. There we go. Michael Mayer. So he was the top tight end on my board. And I think a lot of people had him in that range. And so we now have 2 tight ends back to back. I think that's, if you think about Jimmy Garoppolo, his favorite target was George Kittle. And I think this makes sense that he would be giving him some targets for what they're going to do down there. You also have an offensive coach who's probably thinking offensive minded about it. So we are now 1 pick away from the Seahawks, folks. 1 pick away. So this will be curious. What do the Rams do? Because the Rams pretty much have needs at everything. Like, they could go any direction. I think cornerback could be I think Brian Branch would be a great pick for them. I think would be a really wise move. I'm going to take a quick look at some other positions just to see what's available. Say in chat who you think the Rams should pick. I'm curious. Looking around here at available guys. They could go offensive tackle. Wouldn't be the worst idea. I think cornerback for sure makes some sense. They could go offensive line. I mean, really, they could go anywhere. I don't think they could go receiver. I mean, they just traded Allen Robinson. I just don't know. Like, Josh Downs is repetitive with, he's a slot guy. They don't need another slot guy. Who are folks saying here? Branch, Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker's an interesting idea. They certainly have limited time left with Matthew Stafford. So if they like Hendon Hooker, he could be a logical pick. They lost Bobby Wagner, maybe a Drew Sanders. I mean, I really like Drew Sanders. That guy's a super big playmaker. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, they basically could go almost any direction. When you have a crappy roster, one of the bonuses is you can kind of go anywhere. So we will see who. I am reading a note. I'm not going to say who the pick was, but there was lots of clapping and high-fiving in the Seahawks war room as John Schneider talks to someone on the phone. So it looks like they're about to pick as opposed to making a trade. So that means that there is a guy the Seahawks really wanted that the Rams did not pick. And that means that someone's available for the Seahawks. So let's see who we're going to find out who that is. I'm going to wait. I cannot leave until I know who that is. And then we will find out. The pick is in for the Rams. And we are going to find out really soon who it's going to be. And I'm excited because if it means the Seahawks, like there was a guy they wanted, the fact that they're not trying to trade back, that's a big deal. And I see people in chat like John Michael Schmitz is the guy. That's who's on my mind. That's who's on my mind. And that's who I'd love to see. So we will find out what happens. Someone just sent me trying to tip a pick saying that the Seahawks just got Rashad Penny Jr. Derek, I don't think that's funny. So no, thank you. Oh no, sorry. That was Josh Cashman making that joke, not Derek. All right, let's see who the Rams go with. And we should have that soon. And I appreciate the concern about my driving. I will definitely drive carefully. My hope is that the Seahawks pick will be in. I'm going to be honest. If I see the Seahawks pick before it shows up, I'm going to break my own rule and tell all of you who it is and react to it so that I can get on the road faster and that we can talk about it while I'm on the road. So let's see. Let's see who. They still have not announced who the Rams pick is. So we're waiting on that. And I'm telling you, the guy I want is John Michael Schmitz. Now, there's a few guys I'd be excited about too. It's not that only guy, but I feel like if you get John Michael Schmitz, then you've got your center for the next decade. And I think your offensive line is great. I think it's in really good shape. I think they could potentially go guard later. There's a lot of interesting guards later in this draft. And then you could have 5 guys that could be great. There we go. Steve Avila is the pick for the Rams. Good player. I don't think he was the guy clearly, I never thought he was the guy the Seahawks wanted. Much more of a pass protector, not the nasty kind of offensive lineman I think they like to get. He can play guard or center. So there was, potential that he could have been a guy. Going to. Okay. I now know who the Seahawks picked at 37. And folks, it is not the guy we've talked about. His name is Derek Hall. He is an edge player. And that is the first legitimate surprise of the draft for the Seahawks. So let's talk about who Derek Hall is. This is not a guy I spent a bunch of time on. So let me pull up. He is out of Auburn. He is 6'3". He's 254 pounds. He is 22 years old. Really great get off. Is a guy that also, is built like they say here, built like a Greek god. So he basically has not been a wonderful pass rusher in terms of having a bunch of different pass rush moves. This is a player that PFF had as a 3rd round grade. So for what it's worth, this is a guy that was not expected to go this high. He is, he has not been a great run defender yet. I think this is a guy, looking at his weight, this is an outside linebacker. So this is a guy that's going to be going in there with Darrell Taylor. This is going to be a guy that's going to be going with Uchenna Nwosu. Maybe this is a sign that they're not going to re-sign Uchenna Nwosu. I don't know. It is pretty surprising here that they went edge and that they went with Derek Hall. They were excited about it. let's see how that plays out. I don't know what this means for other parts of the draft. I will say that center is a position that the Seahawks have never valued the way I've valued it, the way a lot of us have valued it. We might be totally wrong on center. They might not take a center till the third round, the fourth round. They might not take a center at all. So we will see what comes of it. For now, I'm going to pause my video. I will dial in over the phone and we can talk as we go. Realistically, I will probably just be on pause here for 20 minutes or so, and then I'll be back. So feel free to stay on. Otherwise, grab some dinner, grab a snack, whatever it is, and I will be back shortly. All right. Is anybody still here? I'm back. Amazing. Hello, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Sorry that I had to wait that long. So I will let folks online know that we are back, at least for now. Let me get the link and reshare. Cool. Cool. All right. So let's talk about Derek Hall for a little bit. I know we're watching stuff go on right now. There's been a number of things that happened since I left. I don't love the pick. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be good. I don't know a ton about him. We talked about it before the draft started today. The Seahawks have a pile of guys at the edge. And it's not clear to me exactly where Derek Hall fits into that mix. So, it doesn't mean that it's not going to work out. He seems like, I listened to his interview while I was driving. Seems like a good kid. Seems like hard charger. Probably gonna be a leader. Probably gonna work really hard. All that kind of stuff. Has some good measurables. His 10-yard split's really good. 40's decent. High jump's decent. Maybe actually it was his broad jump that was decent. I can't remember which. One of them was decent. One of them was not great. But in any event, it seems like an okay play. For me, felt like a guy that if they picked him in the 3rd round, I probably wouldn't have thought much about it. This is the, 6th pick in the 2nd round or whatever. It felt a little high for that. And so if they were going to push a guy up the board at a position, I would have hoped it would have been more for a position where there's more need. Pushing up a guy up the board for a position where you have no real clear need. I'm just curious. I mean, what does this mean for Boye Mafe, Daryl Taylor, Uchenna Nwosu, Tyreek Smith, Alton Robinson? Like, there's a pile there. So I'm kind of curious how that's going to all play out for, who's getting snaps, who's not getting snaps. How does this play? So, yeah, I think that it's nothing that's terrible about it. It's not like, oh man, that was an awful pick. It's just not one that gets me particularly excited. And I think the best thing I see about it is this dude's built like a truck, and we've talked about how important it is for the Seahawks to get tougher. And I think this guy can be part of the answer there. So I think that's cool. We are getting close to the Seahawks' next pick. Washington's on the clock, and they're pick 47. The Seahawks are pick 52. So one of the things I'm waiting for is for the Seahawks to make a move, make a trade. It has not happened yet. Maybe it's not for lack of trying, but interested to see if we see the Seahawks pop up into one of these picks. We will see. I will offer that I was more interested in BJ Ojulari than I was in Derek Hall. And part of what I liked about Ojulari is that I think he has the ability to slide inside. And I'm not sure how much that I just haven't watched enough of Derek Hall, so I can't say for sure. I also like the Ojulari, 21, has a family line that also has NFL, has an NFL brother. So I think that's, he was just someone that I was interested in, but did not spend enough time on Derek Hall, so I can't really speak to that with a lot of detail. So as we're looking now, we saw that Joe Tippmann went off the board while I was gone. That's a center that was interesting. He's the first real center to go off, unless Steve Avila is a guy that they're looking at. And let me just double check something really quick. Yeah. So Keon White went off. I was not as high on Keon White. Safety, Jartavius Martin. Okay. Interesting. Safety going is good. Did see Julius Brents go. We saw Luke Musgrave go. Musgrave again. I was the guy I think is really good. We've not seen Darnell Washington go yet, unless I missed it. So he's still around. Branch is a guy I think is great. So I think the Lions have had a much better day 2 with Laporta and Branch than they did with day 1. Drew Sanders still has not gone. Trenton Simpson still has not gone. So as far as like an off-ball linebacker, I think that there's potential there for one of those guys to be a pick here. I think that it gets really thin at linebacker later on, so maybe they would look at one of those guys here. And let me look at some other guys. So, John Michael Schmitz to this point is still on there. We will see if that remains. Hendon Hooker's still there for people interested. Osiris Torrance is a guy a lot of people had as a first-round pick, and he is sliding. So I still don't think he's a great fit for the Seahawks. I don't think they go with the big lineman as much, but certainly worth a conversation. The pick is in for Tampa Bay. Maybe they'll be the team to go with Hendon Hooker. Who knows? And we'll kind of see what happens there. Let me look at my board for a second of the guys that are available. So Washington's up there for me. Torrance is up there for me. Obviously John Michael Schmitz is still the top guy I'd want of the guys left. Let's see who else. Tooley is another guy that could be interesting. I don't think they'd go Siaka Ika here. We talked about Trent. Cody Mauch is another guy, can play guard or center or tackle. Interesting guy. And there he goes. I like him a lot. I would have liked him in the Seahawks, but not to be. So there goes that. Yeah, Adi is another guy. So yeah, we'll kind of see. We'll see what goes on there. And I think, people talked about Keanu Benton. He's a guy that I think could go as early as now. We will see it, but we're getting close. The Seahawks are now 3 picks away. Of the guys that have gone since the Seahawks picked, the only guy that was like, the only guy that I really had a reaction to would be Cody Mauch. I would have really liked to see him. That guy would be fun to have on the Seahawks for sure. And I think he would be a really cool addition. Not going to happen. Joe Tippmann, probably the best athlete out of the centers. And so don't know. He was never the guy that I liked the most. So not sure. I'm not super upset about that. And let's see. Pick is in for Pittsburgh. And let's see. Curious, what have the Steelers done so far? Let me just pull up another window. Yeah, tell me in chat, who are you guys hoping for? I'd be interested. Give me a quick poll of who do you want to see the Seahawks pick? So the Steelers, they've got Broderick Jones tackle, and they've got Joey Porter Jr. I wonder if they're going to go defensive line here. All right, who do people want? I'm seeing a lot of John Michael Schmitz. I'm seeing a lot of Adi, Keanu Benton, maybe Drew Sanders. Looks like Joe's talking about Siake Ika. Evan is texting me asking who is Derek Hall. So I think a lot of people felt that way. And I don't think everybody felt that way, but some people did. I know Nathan's a fan. Nathan's been talking about him a little bit. So that is one person. I will ask again, please don't tip picks until they show up on the board. So if you're just arriving, please do not tip picks in the chat. People are just watching until it shows up on the screen in front of you. Then people would prefer to get the experience all together. So appreciate that. With that said, the pick has already been tipped. So Keanu Benton is going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That should show up here any second. That is a guy that I know a lot of folks were interested in. So he is now gone. And we are 2 picks away. The Packers are on the clock officially. Packers are on the clock officially at pick 50. Is this the time that the Seahawks trade back from 52 and pick up another third? Do they package a 5th to get another third? Don't know. I honestly don't have a good prediction for what the Seahawks are going to do here. If you want to go by Schneider's draft history, let's just go by draft history. They have not drafted guards or centers for the most part until the 3rd round at least. Ethan Posick was the earliest center they drafted, second round. As far as, I mean, to be totally honest, they haven't drafted a quarterback before the 3rd round. Russell Wilson was the earliest they've ever spent a quarterback pick. So if you're thinking Hendon Hooker, this would be the earliest they've ever drafted a quarterback. That feels a little off. There goes Keanu Benton on the screen. So please do not tip as more picks come. They've never drafted a tight end before the 3rd round. So the Darnell Washington folks like me, it's probably pretty unlikely they'll go that direction, but that's not typical. They have drafted multiple running backs in the 2nd round, including one last year. So maybe Zach Charbonnet, maybe someone like that shows up as an option. We will see. They have drafted a shit ton of wide receivers in the 2nd round. Dwayne Eskridge, DK Metcalf, Paul Richardson, Golden Tate. Taking a couple more in the 3rd round. I don't think a receiver is at all in the cards after what they did yesterday. They had not taken a cornerback before the 3rd, but now they've done it at the 5th overall, so that's gone. Safety is a position that they've spent a 1st, they spent a 2nd, one on Earl, one on Marquise Blair. I don't think safety is a position they'd go to. Linebacker is a position. They spent a 1st on Jordan Brooks. They spent a 2nd on Bobby Wagner. They spent a 3rd on Cody Barton. They have, I think, need there. They could be going linebacker. So Trenton Simpson, I think, is a possibility. And yes, I will just repeat again. Please do not spoil picks. Only react to the pick once you see it on the screen in front of you. Okay, folks? Everybody would like to just have that together. As far as defensive ends, they have done that a lot, and they just did it again. So they've done, 2 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks on defensive ends, on edge players. They just did it again. So we're now up to 4 second-round picks. I don't think they do another edge. They have spent a couple of second-round picks on defensive tackles, so I think that's possible. It could be that you look at like an Adi here, might be possible. I think Going by what Schneider has done in the past, best bet is that you're talking about either a defensive tackle or a linebacker. That's probably, if Schneider's kind of following his history, that's who would be most likely. Let me narrow this down again. There we go. That's better. Interesting that ESPN here, at least, is saying that Darnell Washington is the best fit for the Dolphins. I mean, I really don't think the Seahawks are going to take him. I mean, it would be a little bummer to see him go, but I really don't think that they would take him. So we will see. And folks, again, please do not tip picks or tip moves or anything in the chat. So appreciate that. Pick is in. So that means the Seahawks are on the clock. I'm going to close everything else, so I'm not looking at anything other than this. I advise all of you do it. Please do not tip the pick in the chat. Would appreciate that. We will see who Miami's taking together because that'll have an effect on who the Seahawks go with next. I mean, the biggest shocker from my perspective is if they took a guy like Hendon Hooker. Okay, there's Cam Smith. Really good corner. He's off the clock. Was not going to be a Seahawks pick, so that's great. So the Seahawks are up, folks. Let's get predictions. Actually, don't do predictions because I don't trust everyone. I think somebody is going to tip the pick, so don't predict. But ESPN likes John Michael Schmitz here. And in a lot of the mocks, he did not last this long. So it's a little surprising he is there. That certainly would be among my favorite options for them here. There's a little bit of shades of 2021, would it be? Or was it 2021? Where they were pretty similar spot in the draft, second round. I was sitting here begging them to take Creed Humphrey, and they took D. Eskridge, and it broke my brain. Pick is already in. Holy shit. So the Seahawks already have picked. They're not trading. Do not spoil it. Do not spoil it. Let's see it together. And interesting. Like, the Seahawks are not making moves. I really thought they would have started moving by now. We will see what's going on here. And if again, like, most likely defensive tackle or what was the other one I said? I've lost track. Or linebacker. Yeah, those are the two most likely, but I know a lot of us would love to see John Michael Schmitz. That'd be a fun player for them. And let's see what happens, folks. It's got to be close. I'm seeing that Pete's fired up in the room. That's great. Zach Charbonnet. Oh man, this is gonna piss off a lot of people. So I told you, running back is one of the positions that they overdraft, and they draft it early on. So here's the thing. I hate the choice to take a running back in the second round. I hate it. Hate it, 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 hate it. I really like Zach Charbonnet. I'm not going to lie. I really like Zach Charbonnet. He's been a guilty pleasure. He's a guy that, for folks that have been watching a lot of Seahawks football for a long time, he gives me Chris Warren vibes. Kind of like a little high cut, long strider, but also just a total badass tackle breaker. In a lot of ways, if I could have drawn up the ideal backfield partner for Kenneth Walker, it would be Zach Charbonnet. I think this guy is a really good match with Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker still, in the fact that he is, he's not the biggest dude, and he already has been injured. I think you realistically need 2 bell cow running backs. I had wanted them to get one of these guys. There's running backs they could have gotten in the 4th to 7th round that I would have felt interested. Like we did a mock draft, Jeff and I, this past Tuesday, where we got Chris Rodriguez in the 7th round. And I actually loved that. Chris Rodriguez is a total battering ram, straight ahead runner, not the most creative guy you're going to see, but 7th round, and you got a guy that's super tough, short yardage, like can break some tackles. Cool. 2nd round on running back, after you just spent a 2nd round on running back, is really, really bad. Really, really. I don't want to avoid that. But I love Zach Charbonnet. So I will just say I'm going to be excited to cheer for this guy. I think you all are going to actually love watching this guy play. I think he is a really, really good running back. And so this is what it means. Like for folks like the rest of us that are really hoping that they will take a center in a lot of the drafts, and there are multiple other guys that can profile at center. So Whippler's a guy that could be available late. It's pretty unlikely Schmitz is going to last until the Seahawks' next pick. They're going to have to trade up aggressively to get another pick if they go after him. I do think there's other guards available later that are interesting prospects, so I don't think that's as big of a deal. For folks that are asking, why is it bad? Let me go into that for a second. So running back as a position, this gets into positional value. So I don't want to I'm not a zealot about this, but it's just a reality. When you're building a roster, you got to be smart about how you acquire what positions. Running back is one of the lowest paid positions in the NFL. Like it's right above like kicker, essentially. And so for you to spend a high draft pick on a position that you can get cheaply through free agency is bad process. Additionally, the difference between running backs that are very good and running backs that are just good is pretty minimal. There's a big, fat, gooey middle of running backs that are pretty much interchangeable. So the likelihood that a running back you pick in the 2nd round is going to be significantly better than a running back you pick in the 6th or 7th round is not great. So the chances you're really going to get an advantage by picking them early is not great. And then more generally to the position, offensive lines make offenses better than running backs do. So if you have a really good offensive line, this is why I'm a fan of people like Howie Roseman. He builds the trenches. He builds the defensive line. He builds the offensive line. He does it over and over and over again. And he never fails in the first 2 rounds to prioritize those position groups. If you have a strong offensive line, you can run a mediocre running back behind them and do just fine. If you have a strong offensive line, your quarterback is going to have more time. Your quarterback's going to be healthier. You're going to be able to run more plays and more things. So there's no question in my mind that I value a great offensive line more than I value a great running back. And center is not a super valuable position. So I talk about it a lot. I get it. But here's the thing. The most valuable positions on the offensive line are the 2 tackles. The Seahawks have the 2 tackles. They're good. They're young. They're in their 2nd year now. You have Damian Lewis, who has been reasonably good as a guard, and he's young, and you could get him to your 2nd contract, and that's fine. If you can get 2 more plus guys at center and at right guard, I mean, Phil Haynes is a guy I've been a fan of. I think he's just okay. When he got playing time, he has not really popped. So if you could get a really good center in the middle of that line, I think you're setting up this line to be really good for many years and to be a really foundational part of a good team. And so that's why for me, I would prioritize offensive line over running back. I would prioritize almost everything over running back. But like I said, this is I'm not surprised Pete's fired up. This is a Pete style running back. The guy runs hard. He's just a good player. He's a really, really good player. So there are centers they can get later. We'll see how that goes. They are now 4 picks in with no defensive tackles and really no defensive ends. The only guy that they've picked that plays near that is Derek Hall, who plays edge. He's an outside linebacker. So they also do not have any linebackers picked. They do not have, I don't think they're in good shape at linebacker. Last year, I thought they were in bad shape at linebacker, and they thought they were fine. So this could be a situation again where they're like, yeah, we got Devin Bush. He was a top 10 pick. I think Devin Bush sucks. I'm like hoping that someone beats him out. I do not think you should bet on him. They might be thinking, oh, Jordan Brooks is going to be back. He'll be fine. Jordan Brooks had ACL surgery in January. Like, he got injured in January. Like, I don't think you're going to have any Jordan Brooks of meaning here. This guy, Jervin Dexter, who just went to the Bears, that's one of the big boys. You know, he had a lot of questions about his production and how he played, but he was a pretty supreme athlete as a defensive lineman. And he's a big dude that could put on some more weight, and he could potentially play nose tackle for you. We will see. Like, as much as I like Siaki Ika, he has shorter arms. That's usually been a no-no for the Seahawks, and they don't usually draft run-stuffing players. It's probably unlikely that they're going to pick that dude. So here's the thing. The second round has been very Schneider history-driven. They got an edge again in the second round. Boye Mafe last year. Derek Hall this year. And then they got a running back in the second round. Kenneth Walker last year. Zach Charbonnet this year. I think the process is pretty bad. And there goes Tooley. So Tooley's a guy that I think if he had worked out for the Seahawks, I think that guy is way more helpful than a really good running back. So, I mean, it's hard for me to get past the process of this. I am not as frustrated as I was last year because I happen to just really like Zach Charbonnet. But, you know, it's not good, folks. This is not how I think the team needed. This is kind of as hard of a time as I gave the Lions yesterday for their first round. I think this is kind of that for the Seahawks. I mean, the Lions used a first round pick, a 12th pick on a running back, which I think was really, really stupid. And then they got a middle linebacker, which also is pretty low positional value, especially for a guy that has limited range and coverage. Jack Campbell's a guy that I really like, but I think there's limits to him. And so using a first round pick, I don't know, it's pretty crazy. I would rather the Seahawks have had the first round they did yesterday and this second round than have what the Lions did yesterday and then have their second round. So I think they flip-flopped a little bit. I'm not loving it, folks. I don't see the plan. I don't see the plan of how they're making this defense better. I'm not a believer that Derek Hall is a meaningful addition to this defense. I don't like how much better would Derek Hall have to be than Darrell Taylor or Boye Mafe or Uchenna Nwosu, if you think that. How much better would he have to be to make a massive impact on this defense? Darrell Taylor had 9.5 sacks last year. Is Derek Hall going to have more than that? And I think Darrell Taylor might have more than 9.5 sacks this year. He had a slow start last year. He might have found his groove. Boye Mafe was pretty good against the run last year. And he has upside and be his second year. Are we sure Derek Hall is going to be better than Boye Mafe? Boye Mafe wasn't great last year. He wasn't like a big impact addition. So I don't know. I don't know that I'm seeing how Derek Hall makes this defense significantly better. And I can tell you for sure, Zach Charbonnet does not make this defense significantly better. So It's a little rough. It's a little rough. I think they're going to need to. I've been saying it since they started. They need to trade up. They need to get another. They need to get another pick in the third round. So they do not pick until, let's see. They go until 83, right? So they've got a while to go till they're on the board again. They somehow can move up in the third round. That would be great. If they can add, maybe they move into the back half of the second round. They've still got, what is it? 6 or 7 picks to go. 6 picks, 7 picks to go, 8 picks to go. But let's have some patience. I was furious last year when they didn't take Abe Lucas in the second round. That was the guy that I was so sure, like, you draft your 2 tackles, your bookends. That was the thing. Why are you passing on the higher position value, drafting a running back that, and what I thought, honestly, and still am not convinced otherwise, is a kind of mediocre edge player in Mafe. And then they got Abe Lucas in the third round. And if those had been flipped, if they got Abe Lucas in the second round and they took Kenneth Walker in the third, I would have felt pretty different about that. So they might know how the board's going to fall differently than I do. They might have some other ideas. They made some really good choices last year. I will say, though, John Schneider has yet to draft an impact defensive tackle, unless you consider Jaron Reed to be an impact defensive tackle. These are the players that are defensive tackles that John Schneider has picked in his career: Malik McDowell, Jaron Reed, Rasheem Green, Nazir Jones, Jordan Hill, Jay Howard, Quentin Jefferson, Jimmy Staten, DeMarcus Christmas, and Pep Livingston. That is a bad list of guys. So I have some questions about whether they've got the ability to evaluate defensive tackles properly and that they value them properly. I see someone saying Jaron Reed was impact. I guess he had the 1 year where he had 10.5 sacks. I get it. I mean, Jaron Reed has been a journeyman defensive lineman. He there's nobody that highly values Jaron Reed. So I don't really feel like that qualifies to me. Even if, let's say, I give you that to you, I struggle a lot with the notion that Jaron Reed is an impact defensive tackle. But let's just say I'll give that to you. That's one guy in 13 years. So I think this is a blind spot. I think it's a blind spot, and gives me concern. I don't like what the Seahawks have on the defensive line. They mentioned yesterday they know that it's an issue. I do not like what they have at linebacker right now. I think they essentially, Bobby Wagner, as much as I love Bobby Wagner, he's an older dude. He's limited. They're talking about changing up his play time. I think the linebacker thing I can get around a little bit because they're likely expecting Jamal Adams to play a role. They might even have Julian Love play in the box sometimes. He's played kind of the strong safety thing. Maybe there's some interchangeability there that could help. I do like John Radigan. I'm not going to say he's going to be the next great player, but I think I liked him better than I like Cody Barton. So I can kind of get my head around that. I still think it's a pretty weak room and could be a disastrous room depending. And then, look, interior offensive line, I don't think Evan Brown is a disaster. I think he's probably similar to Austin Blythe, maybe a little bit tougher, maybe. So I don't know. I'm doing that a lot right now. I think that defensive tackle is a position that is the biggest glaring issue for them. They have to address it. If we're looking out later in the draft about guys that they could be thinking about or that might make sense for them to talk about, Siaki Ika's one. Cameron Young is a guy that I think is a pretty likely candidate for the Seahawks. They could get him later. Keandre Coburn out of Texas is another guy. Kind of runs hot and cold, but a big dude. I think Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina is a later round small school. He screams Schneider to me. So I think that's a possibility. I want to give a little shout out to ESPN. Their best fit for a lot of these teams is turning out to be the picks. So whatever algorithm they're using for saying who's the best fit is it's not perfect, but it's not terrible. I don't like this. Don't make that the best fit. Anyway, so I think we got to give up on the John Michael Schmitz dream. The likelihood he's going to be there by 83 is pretty unlikely. And I don't know that the Seahawks have shown any reason why they're going to pick a center with one of their first 83, first pick in the top 100. So I think we're talking likely about linebacker, likely about nose tackle, maybe 3-4 defensive end. So, I mean, Carl Brooks starts to be a guy that might work out, might be available that late. Mora Ojomo, I don't love him, but he'll be available most likely. On the center side, let's say John Michael Schmitz goes, which is probably going to happen any moment. And folks, we're trying not to tip the picks in here. So if that's what just happened, be nice if you didn't do it. But there are some other centers. I mean, there goes John Michael Schmitz. So the dream's over. Luke Whippler's an option. There's a guy out of Michigan, Olusegun Oluwatimi, who's interesting. So we'll kind of see. Yeah. So we might be having the next Creed Humphrey conversation, folks. Instead of picking a wide receiver over a really good center, they pick a running back over a really good center. And that's tough to swallow. So we're going to do this. I'm going to call it now because I got to go make dinner for the kiddo. It's going to be a while till the Seahawks pick. I will say, here's what I'm going to do. I will keep this up and running. And if something happens, if they trade up, I will run in here. Once the Seahawks get to their pick in the third round, I will probably come in here and talk about it. But I'm not going to be here for, could be 45 minutes or an hour. So folks, feel free to stay in here and chat, watch together, talk together. That's totally fine. But I think I am going to go get dinner made and we'll come back and talk some more about it. So not the same energy that we had yesterday. But the draft's far from over. Let's see what happens the rest of tonight. All right. I will be back a little bit later. Until then, feel free to hang out. Hey, folks. So Seahawks traded out of the rest of the draft for tonight. Traded back 25 picks to pick up a third-round pick from Broncos next year. Not the best day in my mind, but, we'll see tomorrow. They have so many. Hey, Josh. They got a lot of picks left tomorrow. I am really surprised that they did not try to move up. And there goes Trenton. Oh no, that's best fit. I was gonna say there's still a lot of decent players on the board. The Seahawks' next pick is let's just double check. Seattle. Where did it go? There we go. Seattle's next pick will be the 6th pick in the 4th round. So they have the 6th and the 21st pick in the 4th round. So it'll be early tomorrow. They've got 2 5th-round picks. So they got 2 4th round, 2 5th-round picks. That'll come quick. We'll see if they move up at all. I still would be surprised if they take every one of these picks. But we'll see. And there's no Noah Fant move at this point. So, yeah, tomorrow's going to be active. I wish they had this the way I want it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the Seahawks' next pick will be 108, which is 25 picks. This is the pick they got for the Broncos. They got 108 and 123. With that, folks, I am going to shut down the pod for the rest of the night. Thanks for the folks that stuck around. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will be back again tomorrow. Don't know if I'm going to do a live pod, but we will definitely have stuff to talk about. Take care.